It is November 25th, 1177. Dawn is still cold over the Judean hills, and Jerusalem has hours left to live. Not days, not weeks. Hours. Saladin's 30,000 men are already moving inland. Mamluk cavalry, Kurdish horsemen, Sudanese infantry hardened by desert war. A force so vast its dust cloud swallows the horizon whole. Its supply trains stretch for miles. Its war drums carry on the wind like a second heartbeat, low, relentless, getting louder. No Christian army is riding to stop it. No relief column is coming from the north. No miracle is scheduled for this Tuesday in November. If Jerusalem falls today, and every honest military mind in the Levant believes it will, the Crusader kingdom does not retreat. It does not regroup. It does not survive in exile and return stronger. It ends. 78 years of blood and faith and stone, gone. Every church, every chronicle, every name carved into every wall since the first crusade planted its flag in this soil. Erased so completely that history itself might not remember anything was ever here. That is the stakes. That is what today costs. And the only thing standing between that erasure and eternity, the only blade the Christian world has left to raise against 30,000, is a boy who cannot feel his own hands. His name is Baldwin IV. He is 16 years old. His hands are wrapped in linen, not because they are bleeding, because the nerves inside them are already dead. Leprosy has been eating him alive since he was 9 years old. 7 years of slow, methodical destruction. His fingers feel nothing. His face is marked with lesions. His vision blurs on bad days. On the worst days he cannot cross a room without someone catching him. His physicians have stopped trying to cure him. They are keeping records now. The barons of Jerusalem look at this boy and see a vacancy. A throne with a short remaining occupant. They plan around him. Through him. They see his bandaged hands and they see weakness. They see his blurred eyes and they see the end. They are wrong. They are catastrophically, historically, permanently wrong. Because they are looking at his body. They are not looking at his will. And those are not the same thing. They have never been the same thing. But here is the part no one tells you. The part that changes everything you think you know about this battle. 500 men do not defeat 30,000 because of tactics alone. Not because of terrain. Not because of luck. They do it because one dying boy decides that dying can be made to mean something. Hold that thought. Because before we follow Baldwin out of Jerusalem's gates, before we stand on that ridge and watch history crack open below us, you need to understand exactly what 30,000 looks like when it is coming for you. And you need to understand exactly what kind of man built it. The year is 1177. And Saladin is the most dangerous human being alive. He is 39 years old. Patient the way a desert is patient, not empty, but waiting. Waiting for the precise moment when the ground shifts and everything that was balanced suddenly is not. He has spent a decade doing what every emir before him said was impossible. Unifying the Muslim world. Not by force alone. Not by prayer alone. By a quality rarer than either. Clarity. He sees the board. He sees every piece. He sees which fractures to press, which alliances to honor, which enemies to wait out and which to destroy immediately. Egypt answers him. Cairo's gold flows into his treasury without ceasing. Damascus answers him. Its cavalry, lean, fast, brutal, disciplined by decades of frontier war, rides under his golden eagle standard without hesitation. The Mamluk soldiers answer him. Know what a Mamluk is. Know it in your body, not just your mind. A Mamluk is not a soldier who chose war. A Mamluk is a child who was purchased, bought young, taken from his family, often from the steppes of Central Asia or the Caucasus Mountains, and given to the military. He grows up knowing nothing else. No farm, no trade, no family dinner table, only weapons, only horses, only the precise, repeated practice of killing until it becomes instinct. By the time a Mamluk reaches the battlefield, he has been training for 15 years. He does not fight with courage. He fights with reflex. Now multiply that by thousands. Add Kurdish cavalry who know this terrain the way you know your own street. Add Sudanese infantry who march through heat that kills European warhorses and arrive ready for combat. Add siege engineers. Add logistics officers managing supply lines across hundreds of miles of desert. This is not an army. This is a civilization pointed at you like a weapon. And it is 30,000 strong. And it is already moving. Now here is what you need to ask yourself. What would you do? Not as a general. Not as a king. As a human being. 16 years old. Body failing. Physicians looking at you like a conclusion instead of a patient. Barons circling your throne like it is already empty. Smoke visible from your walls where towns used to be. 30,000 enemies between you and survival. 300 nights between you and oblivion. What do you do? Most men, brave men, honest men, men with far healthier bodies and far more to live for, look at those numbers and find wisdom in walls. They call it strategy. They call it prudence. They call it living to fight another day. Baldwin IV calls it something else. He calls it dying for nothing. The smoke from Saladin's coastal raids rises in thin black columns above Jerusalem's walls. Each one is a message. You are next. No one is coming. This land is already mine. Inside the city, that message lands. The panic is not the loud kind. It is the quiet kind. The kind that lives behind the eyes of men who cannot stop doing the math. The kind that makes brave men speak in low voices about walls. About waiting. About the practical wisdom of stone when death waits outside it. The council chamber fills with quiet. The barons sit. The map spread between them. The smoke visible through the high window, if any man chooses to raise his eyes and look. No man looks. And then the door opens. And a 16-year-old boy with bandaged hands and a face marked by disease and eyes that carry the absolute, iron certainty of a man who has already made his decision, walks in. And the room changes. What happens in that chamber in the next 10 minutes does not just change the course of one battle. It changes the course of the medieval world. And the part no one tells you, the detail that every chronicle records and every modern retelling glosses over, is not what Baldwin says. It is what he does before he speaks. Stay with us. If this is the kind of history you have been looking for, the real moments, the human truth behind the battles, the stories that were buried because they were too raw and too real for comfortable textbooks, subscribe right now. Hit the bell. We find what history tried to forget. Every single time. He does not speak. That is the detail the chronicles remember. 800 years later, that silence still sits in the room like a held blade. Baldwin IV walks to the table. Every step is deliberate. Every step costs him something visible, a tightening in the jaw, a tremor across the shoulders that he suppresses the way a man suppresses a scream. He reaches the edge, places his bandaged hands flat on the wood, cannot feel the grain beneath his fingers, steadies himself against it anyway. Then he looks down at the map. Not the way a frightened boy looks at a map. The way a surgeon looks at an open wound. Cold. Precise. Already cutting. The barons watch. They expect deference. They expect the dying boy to ask for their guidance, their experience, their permission to survive the only way they think survival is possible, behind stone. He gives them none of it. His wrapped finger traces a line across the map. From Saladin's last known position on the coast. Inland. Toward Ramla. Toward the undefended heart of the kingdom. Then he speaks. And the room cracks open. But before you hear what Baldwin says in that chamber, before his words turn every man in the room into a weapon or a coward, you need to understand the mind behind the voice. Because this boy did not fall from the sky. He was forged. His tutor's name is William of Tyre. Archbishop. Historian. One of the most formidable intellects in the medieval Levant. He is the man who first discovers Baldwin's disease. He is also the man who refuses, absolutely, ferociously refuses, to let the disease become the boy's identity. The story is in William's own chronicle. The boys are playing. A common game among noble children in the Crusader courts. They grip each other's arms. Dig their nails in. The one who cries out first loses. Baldwin does not cry out. The other boys tear at his skin. He watches them do it. His face calm. His arm still. Not because he is brave. Because there is nothing there. No signal traveling from skin to brain. No pain. No heat. No pressure. Nothing. William sees this from across the courtyard. And something in his chest goes cold. He calls the physicians. The physicians press heated metal to Baldwin's palm. The boy does not flinch. The diagnosis arrives like a door slamming shut. Leprosy. Baldwin is 9 years old. Now here is the part that separates this boy from every other doomed prince in history. Most tutors would slow down, reduce the lessons, shift to theology. Prepare the boy for a short life and a quiet death. William does the opposite. He accelerates. He pours military history into Baldwin like a man filling a vessel he knows will crack. Fast, deliberately, holding nothing back. He teaches him Alexander's campaigns. The logistics of Rome. The way Hannibal read terrain, the way a musician reads a score. He teaches him siege warfare, cavalry tactics, the mathematics of supply lines, the critical difference between fighting a battle and choosing the right battle to fight. And he teaches him one question that he asks the boy again and again until it becomes reflex. If you were your enemy, what would you do next? Baldwin learns to answer that question before he learns to hold court. His mind becomes a mirror. He sees his opponent's intentions reflected back with a clarity that unsettles men twice his age. By 12, he corrects his military advisors mid-sentence. By 14, he sits in war councils and listens with the kind of stillness that makes experienced commanders uneasy. Not because he disagrees. Because he already sees 3 moves beyond what they are proposing. By 15, he is crowned king. The disease is spreading. Everyone in the Levant knows, Christian and Muslim alike. The boy on the throne in Jerusalem has an expiration date written across his skin. And not a single one of them understands what is actually sitting behind that ruined face. The High Court of Jerusalem does not see what William sees. They see a body, a declining one, and they plan accordingly. You need to understand the men in this room. Not as villains. Not as traitors. As politicians in the 12th century. Which means as survivors navigating a world where miscalculating succession gets you killed. Raymond III, Count of Tripoli. The most experienced Frankish lord in the Levant. He has been a prisoner of the Muslims. He speaks Arabic fluently. He understands Saladin's strategic mind better than any Christian alive. He is also a man who has spent years positioning himself for the regency. For the moment when the leper king's body finally stops cooperating and someone needs to hold the wheel. Raymond counsels caution. Wait. Negotiate. Preserve strength. His logic is clean. His motives are layered. And then there is Reynaud of Chatillon. Reynaud is not clean. Reynaud is not cautious. Reynaud is a storm wrapped in chainmail. A former prince of Antioch who spent 16 years in a Muslim dungeon. 16 years of stone walls and darkness and the slow grinding of a man's pride against iron bars. He came out of that cell harder than anything the cell contained. He raids caravans. He attacks Muslim pilgrims. He provokes Saladin with the deliberate, calculated recklessness of a man who has already survived the worst anyone can do to him. In this council chamber, Raymond represents the mind. Reynaud represents the fist. And Baldwin, the dying boy between them, must choose which one to become. He chooses neither. He becomes something else entirely. You speak of walls. His voice cuts the murmuring dead. Every baron stops. Every eye moves to the boy at the head of the table. You speak of waiting, of prudence, of preserving what we have. He pauses, not for effect, for breath. The lungs do not cooperate the way they used to. What do we have? No one answers. Because the answer is a wound no one wants to touch. Saladin does not want to besiege this city. He wants to take everything around it. Every farm, every road, every village, every life. He wants to turn Jerusalem into a skull, empty inside, surrounded by nothing, waiting to be picked up. His clouded eyes sweep the table. From Raymond's careful frown to Reynaud's coiled stillness. If we wait behind these walls, we do not survive. We witness. We watch our people die from a height that lets us count the fires. He grips the table's edge. His knuckles, beneath the linen, go white. We ride. Today. The room erupts. The objections crash against each other. The mathematics. The impossibility. 300 knights against a host that swallows horizons. The king cannot even grip a sword. How can he grip a campaign? Baldwin lets the noise break around him like a wave against rock. He does not argue. He does not explain. He turns to his squire. A boy barely younger than himself. Standing in the corner. Hands trembling. Eyes wet. Bring my armor. The squire stares. My horse. The boy's lips part. No sound. And the true cross. That last command, those 3 words, detonate through the chamber with the force of a physical blow. The true cross is not a relic you bring to a skirmish. It is the most sacred object in the Christian world, the fragment of wood believed to hold the last breath of Christ. It stays in the church of the Holy Sepulchre. It comes out only when existence itself is at stake. Baldwin is not asking for a symbol. He is declaring a covenant. He is saying to every man in this room, and to every man who will hear about it within the hour, that this ride is not a military operation. It is an offering. A final act of faith placed on the altar of the only land where that faith can physically stand. When the true cross moves, the kingdom's soul moves with it. There is no arguing after that. You do not argue with a king who has just invoked the instrument of God's sacrifice and bound it to his own. The Templars do not wait for the argument to end. In the temple precinct, the order arrives. And 80 men begin preparing for war the way other men prepare for prayer. In silence. With precision. With the absolute internal certainty of men who have already accounted for their own deaths and found the math acceptable. Odo de Saint-Amand, Grand Master of the Order. A face that could have been carved from the bedrock of Jerusalem itself. All angles and flat planes and eyes that process information the way a blade processes flesh. He does not ask about the odds. He does not need to. He hears that the king rides. That the true cross rides with him. He turns to his marshals. Form up. 2 words. No hesitation. No discussion. These men, the Knights Templar, have built their entire existence around one vow, the defense of the Holy Land. They own nothing. They inherit nothing. They retreat from nothing. Their rule is explicit. A Templar does not leave the field while an enemy banner still flies. Capture means death. Surrender does not exist. They are men who have already given away everything a human being uses to negotiate with the world. All that remains is the fight. And the fight has just been called. The gates of Jerusalem open outward. And the city holds its breath. A thin, glittering column of steel and horseflesh and desperate faith rides through streets that have gone silent. At its head, hoisted onto his destrier by men whose hands are gentle and whose faces are terrified, rides Baldwin IV. The weight of his mail presses into flesh that cannot report the damage. His numb hands grip the high pommel. His legs, weakened beyond what any physician thought compatible with riding, lock against the saddle through pure trained reflex. He looks small on that horse. That is what the people notice. Not the crown. Not the armor. The smallness. A boy inside a man's war shell. A body that should be lying in a darkened room, carried instead on a warhorse toward an army that outnumbers him by a factor of 60 to 1. The sound the crowd makes is not a cheer. It is something that has no name. A sound pulled from deep in the chest. Part prayer. Part grief. Part awe at what they are watching. A boy who has nothing left to give except himself, giving exactly that. They line the streets. They press their children forward to see. They cross themselves. They weep without choosing to, because they understand. Every one of them. This is what sacrifice looks like when it puts on armor and rides past your door. The column clears the gate. The road bends south. The dust begins to rise. If you are standing on those walls, if you are watching that thin line of steel disappear into the Judean haze, you are watching the last military force your kingdom possesses ride toward a fight it cannot win. And you are watching a boy who cannot feel his own hands lead them there. You do not know if you will see him again. You do not know if you will see any of them again. You know only this: a king who could have stayed behind walls and waited for death chose to ride out and meet it on his own terms. And something about that choice, something you cannot name and cannot argue with, makes you believe that maybe, the math is not the only thing that matters. But the road to Montgisard does not run through faith alone. It runs through a fortress called Ascalon. And inside that fortress, Baldwin IV is about to set the trap that Saladin, brilliant, patient, strategically flawless Saladin, will walk into with his eyes wide open. If this story has gotten under your skin, if you can feel that gate closing behind a boy king riding toward the impossible, then hit the like button. Tell us in the comments, would you have ridden with Baldwin? Or stayed behind the walls? Because that is the question every person in Jerusalem faced on this day. And not one of them forgot their answer. They reach Ascalon before Saladin's vanguard seals it shut. Barely. The march south from Jerusalem is 75 miles of hard road. Rock and scrub. Low brown hills that give nothing. No shade, no water, no comfort. Baldwin rides through all of it. His squire stays at his side, watching for the forward sway that means the king is about to lose consciousness. It does not come. Not today. Not yet. They ride through the gates of Ascalon. The garrison stares. 300 knights. A column of raw infantry. A boy in royal armor who looks like he is being held upright by something other than his spine. This is what Jerusalem has sent. This is the wall between Saladin and everything. Now comes the moment Saladin gives the battle away. And he does not even know it. From Ascalon's walls, Baldwin watches the Muslim host pass. Not marching toward the fortress. Past it. North and east. Toward the open farmlands of the Judean lowlands. Toward Ramla. Toward the monasteries and villages and undefended roads that connect Jerusalem to everything that keeps it alive. Saladin's scouts have confirmed it. The crippled king is inside Ascalon with a handful of men. And Saladin decides this is not a threat. He is correct. 300 men behind walls are not a threat. They are a detail. A name on a list to be dealt with later. So the Sultan turns his attention to what matters. The countryside. The wealth. The systematic dismantling of the Crusader kingdom's ability to function. And his army, 30,000 strong, begins to do what victorious armies have done since the beginning of war. It relaxes. This is the part you need to feel in your chest. Not in your head. In your chest. Because this is where the Battle of Montgisard is actually won. Not on the ridge. Not in the charge. Here. In this quiet, invisible moment when Saladin's army stops being an army and becomes a crowd. Units scatter. Detachments ride out to raid monasteries. Cavalry dismount to strip farms. Infantry stack their weapons in the shade and count plunder. Horses are unsaddled. Cook fires lit. Tents raised in the casual spacing of men who believe the campaign is already over. 30,000 men stretched across 50 miles of rolling countryside. No formation. No concentration. No defensive posture. The greatest military force in the Muslim world, the unified strength of Egypt and Damascus, the pride of Kurdish and Mamluk arms, dissolves into 30,000 individuals enjoying an afternoon. And the Sultan himself, Saladin, with his personal guard, his household staff, his command pavilion, makes camp near a low sandy ridge. Near a place the Franks call Montgisard. With perhaps 5,000 to 8,000 men around him. The rest are miles away. Unreachable. Useless. Inside Ascalon, Baldwin is not waiting. He is loading a spring. He issues the arriere ban. If you do not know this term, know it now. The arriere ban is the absolute final summons of a feudal kingdom. Not a call for volunteers. Not a request. A command from the anointed king to every man who holds land, owes service, or calls himself Christian. Come now, come armed, come ready to die if that is what the day requires. It is the sound a kingdom makes when its back touches the wall. And the kingdom answers. From Gaza, 60 miles south, the Templars move. A contingent of knights and sergeants from the order's garrison cuts through loose Muslim patrols, rides hard through the night, and arrives at Ascalon's gates dust-covered and grim. 80 more white mantles. 80 more men whose vows make retreat impossible and death a professional expectation. Hospitallers arrive from the southeastern fortresses. Hard men in black with white crosses. Disciplined. Silent. Ready. And then come the others. The ones no chronicle gives enough credit to. The burgesses. The settlers. Merchants who close their shops and pull swords from beneath their counters. Farmers who lift spears from above their hearths. Pilgrims who crossed the Mediterranean Sea to pray at the Holy Sepulchre and now find themselves conscripted into the defense of the land that contains it. They are not professional soldiers. They are something more dangerous. They are men defending the only thing they have left. Day by day, Ascalon fills. By the time Baldwin is ready to ride again, he commands 500 knights. 3,000 to 4,000 infantry. A force cobbled together from faith and desperation and the refusal to accept arithmetic as destiny. Still outnumbered. Massively. Grotesquely. But no longer alone. And Baldwin, the boy with the strategic mind that William of Tyre built, sees something in the intelligence reports that no one else sees. This is the insight that wins Montgisard. Not the charge. Not the wedge. This. The scouts return from the countryside. Dust on their faces. Urgency in their voices. They deliver the information Baldwin has been waiting for. Saladin's army is scattered. The Sultan is near Montgisard with 5,000 to 8,000 men. The rest, the other 22,000 to 25,000, are spread across miles of open country, raiding, foraging, celebrating a victory that has not yet been earned. Baldwin does not hesitate. Where is Saladin himself? Near Montgisard, my lord. His main camp. His guard. His standard. How many? 5,000 with him. Perhaps 8. No more. Silence in the tent. Odo de Saint-Amand stands against the far wall. Arms crossed. His weathered face reads the numbers before the scout finishes speaking. His eyes narrow. The head is exposed, Odo says. Quiet. Flat. The voice of a man stating a geometric fact. Baldwin nods. The motion is small. Controlled. His wrapped fingers tap the table once. Then we cut it off. The war council that follows lasts less time than you would expect for a decision that will determine whether the kingdom of Jerusalem survives the month. Reynald of Chatillon speaks with the flat certainty of a man who decided what he wanted to do the moment he heard the numbers. We go now. Before his outriders notice we have moved. Before a single scattered unit can ride back to warn him. Baldwin studies the map. His voice is thin. His words are not. If we hit Saladin directly, if we break his guard and scatter his center, the rest collapses on its own. An army without a general is not an army. It is a crowd. And a crowd runs. Odo de Saint-Amand pushes off the wall. Something moves behind his eyes. Not quite approval. Something harder. Recognition. The wedge, he says. Straight through. No pausing. No circling. No skirmishing. Straight through the camp. Straight through to Saladin himself. Straight through, Baldwin confirms. The council is over. They leave Ascalon in silence. No drums. No trumpets. No war songs. 500 knights ride in close formation. The infantry follows behind, 3,000 to 4,000 men walking at the pace that foot soldiers have walked since the beginning of human conflict. Steady. Relentless. Carrying weapons and water, and the full weight of what they are about to attempt. The true cross rides at the center of the column. The Bishop of Bethlehem carries the golden reliquary across his saddle. It catches the flat November light. A dull gleam. Not triumphant. Sacred. The march is north and east. Through the Judean foothills. The terrain is low ridges and dry riverbeds. Brown scrub and pale rock. A landscape that gives nothing freely. Not shade, not concealment, not comfort. Baldwin rides without speaking. His jaw is set. His eyes are focused on the middle distance, the place where the hills fold into each other and the ground begins to slope toward the valley beyond. Reynald rides to his left. Coiled. His hand resting on his sword pommel the way another man's hand rests on an armrest. Casual. But the knuckles are white. Odo rides to his right. Silent. His white mantle stirring in the wind. His face showing nothing except the rigid, controlled blankness of a man who has already calculated every outcome and accepted all of them equally. Behind them, stretching back along the trail, the column moves like a single held breath. The sun lowers. The light turns. Gold becomes copper. Copper becomes rust. Shadows stretch long across the ridgeline as the column climbs the last rise. And then Odo raises his fist. The column stops. Every horse. Every man. Every breath. Silence falls across 500 armed men the way darkness falls across a room when the last candle dies. Below them, spread across a broad, shallow valley beneath the sandy rise of Montgisard, lies Saladin's camp. It is everything the scouts promised. And it is worse. Fires burn for cooking, not defense. Horses stand unsaddled in loose clusters. Tents are scattered in the careless spacing of men who believe the nearest enemy is 100 miles away. The smell of roasting meat drifts up the slope. Laughter carries on the cooling air. The golden eagle standard of the Ayyubid dynasty hangs beside a large pavilion, limp, because there is no wind, because even the air is relaxed. No sentries on the ridgeline. No cavalry screen in the approaches. No formations. No lines. No readiness of any kind. 500 men look down into that valley. And every one of them understands. This is the moment. This is the crack. This is the opening that closes the instant anyone in that camp looks up. Baldwin dismounts. It takes 2 knights to lower him from his horse. His legs give on contact with the ground. He grips an armored shoulder. Steadies. Breathes through clenched teeth. Then, slowly, with a deliberateness that makes every man watching feel the weight of it in their own knees, he lowers himself to the ground. He kneels. And the entire army kneels with him. 500 knights. Thousands of foot soldiers. In the dust of a Judean ridgeline. In the dying light of November 25, 1177. The feast of Saint Catherine, Virgin and Martyr. A woman who was broken on a wheel and still did not recant. The Bishop of Bethlehem raises the true cross. The reliquary catches the last horizontal light of the setting sun. For a single suspended heartbeat, the gold burns against the darkening sky, not gleaming, not reflecting, burning, as if the wood inside remembers the fire of the original sacrifice and has chosen this moment to show it. No one speaks. The prayers are private. Each man alone with his God. Some ask for victory. Some ask for strength. Some simply ask to be worthy of the ground they are about to wet with blood. Baldwin's prayer is silent. His lips move behind the linen that covers the lower half of his face. His hands are pressed together, numb against numb, feeling nothing, holding everything. His eyes close. He is not praying to live. He knows what he is. He is praying for enough. Enough strength for one charge. Enough time for one act that justifies the crown and the cost and the slow destruction of a body he did not choose and has never once surrendered to. When they rise, something has changed. You cannot see it. You cannot point to it. But if you are standing on that ridge, if you look into the faces of these men as they climb to their feet and brush the dust from their knees, you know it. The fear is still there. But something has moved beneath the fear. Something older than any of them. Something that does not need numbers or logic or the approval of military science to exist. A decision, private, absolute, made by every man individually in the silence of his own heart. They are going down into that valley. And they are going through. Baldwin is lifted back into his saddle. He draws his sword. The blade catches the copper light and holds it. He looks at his men. His 500. His impossible, inadequate, magnificent 500. The Templars have already formed the wedge. Dense. Tight. 80 white mantles at the tip, the rest falling in behind like the shaft of a spear. Lances rise. 12 feet of ash wood tipped with steel. Then lower. Slowly. In unison. Pointing downhill. Toward the fires. Toward the laughter. Toward the relaxed, unsuspecting center of the most powerful army in the Muslim world. Odo de Saint-Amand takes his position at the apex. He does not turn around. He does not give a speech. He adjusts his grip. Settles into his saddle. And waits. Baldwin settles in behind him. Pain radiating through joints that scream at the angle of the saddle. Vision blurring at the edges. Breath thin. He does not care. He is here. Mounted. Armed. A king at the center of the weapon his kingdom has become. And his voice, a voice that belongs to a body that should not be upright, carried on lungs that should not have air left, rises across the ridge. By this hill sits a man who believes he has already taken everything from us. Our land. Our people. Our future. Silence. He has not taken the one thing that matters. Silence. He has not taken us. The horses shift beneath their riders. Hooves stamp in the dry earth. Metal rattles against metal. Breath clouds in the cooling air. Below them, the valley glows with firelight. Above them, the first stars appear. Between those 2 points, between the warmth of the enemy's confidence and the cold of the approaching night, 500 men wait for the signal that will send them into the most lopsided cavalry charge in the history of the Crusades. What happens in the next 40 minutes will be recorded by every chronicler who witnesses it, Muslim and Christian alike, with the same stunned, disbelieving language. 500 against thousands. A dying boy at the center of the storm. A charge that every law of warfare says should have been a massacre, and instead becomes a miracle. Montgisard is about to begin, and no one who survives it will ever be the same. He lowers his sword. Not a flourish. Not a dramatic sweep. A simple, forward tilt of the blade. As if pointing to the exact place in the valley where he intends to cut. The sound begins. Not with a shout. Not with a trumpet. With the first shift of weight in 500 saddles. A collective lean forward. A transfer of energy from rider to horse to earth. The horses feel it first. Ears flatten. Muscles coil. They have done this before. They know what this pressure in their flanks means. The descent begins at a walk. Deliberate. Controlled. 500 men moving down the slope in a silence so complete you can hear the creak of leather, the rattle of a loose shield strap, the sharp intake of a breath held too long. In the valley, no one looks up. Why would they? The ridge is a dark line against a darkening sky. The Christian army is supposed to be miles away, trapped behind walls, waiting for a siege that may or may not come. The sentries, the few that were posted, are facing outward, toward the open plain. Not upward, toward the high ground at their back. A fatal assumption. The walk becomes a trot. The trot is where the formation tightens. The Templar wedge compresses. Shoulder to shoulder. Knee to knee. Lances lower another degree. The points, already aimed downhill, now seek specific targets, gaps between tents, clusters of men around fires, the path of least resistance to the Golden Eagle standard. 200 yards from the camp's edge. A man straightens from a cook fire. He wipes his hands on his tunic. He looks up to check the stars for the evening prayer. And he freezes. His brain does not process what he sees at first. It is too improbable. A dark mass moving down the ridge. Silent. Solid. A piece of the night itself detaching and flowing toward him. He blinks. The mass resolves into shapes. Horses. Riders. Gleaming points of steel catching the last of the firelight. His mouth opens. The sound that comes out is not a warning. It is a thin, high exhalation of pure disbelief. The man next to him turns. Follows his gaze. And then the world explodes. Baldwin's sword flashes forward. The trot becomes a canter. The canter becomes a gallop. And then the gallop becomes something for which there is no human word. A seismic event. A rolling thunder that starts in the ground and climbs into your chest and shakes the air from your lungs. 500 warhorses at full charge. The sound is a physical wall. A roar of hooves hammering dry earth, of mail rattling against plate, of men shouting a single wordless cry that is equal parts prayer and rage. The camp erupts into chaos. But it is the wrong kind of chaos. The kind born of total surprise. Not of defense. Men scramble away from the noise, not toward it. They trip over tent ropes. They reach for weapons stacked too far away. They shout conflicting orders that are swallowed by the approaching storm. The Templar wedge hits the first scattered line of pickets. And erases it. There is no clash. No meeting of lines. The pickets are simply gone. Plowed under. The impact is not the sound of metal on metal. It is the sound of splintering wood, of tearing canvas, of a single, unified, catastrophic crunch as men and shelters are flattened beneath 1,500 pounding hooves. The wedge does not slow. It drives deeper. Odo de Saint-Amand is the tip of the spear. His world narrows to a tunnel. The Golden Eagle standard at the far end. The screaming, scrambling mass in between. His sword rises and falls with the mechanical efficiency of a piston. He does not aim. He points. The weight of the charge, the momentum of the horse, the sharpened edge of the steel, they do the work. A man turns with a spear. Odo's blade meets the shaft, shears through it, continues into the shoulder beneath. He does not feel the impact. He is already looking for the next target. Behind him, the Templar wedge functions as a single organism. A killing machine honed by decades of doctrine and drill. They do not fight as individuals. They fight as a geometry of force. The man to your left protects your flank. The man to your right advances when you advance. The wedge moves through the camp like a blade through cloth, parting, slicing, leaving a widening seam of ruin in its wake. Baldwin rides just behind the tip. His role is not to kill. His role is to be seen. Every jolt of the saddle sends lightning bolts of pain through hips and spine that have no cartilage left to cushion them. His vision swims. He grips the pommel with numb hands, trusting muscle memory to keep him upright. His sword is in his right hand. He swings it when a shape stumbles into his path. The contact is a dull vibration up his arm. He does not see if the man falls. He does not need to. He is the flag, the symbol, the living proof that the King of Jerusalem is here, in the dust and the blood, sharing the risk he asked his men to take. And every Frankish knight who sees him, every sergeant, every Turcopole, every burgess with a spear, fights harder. Saladin is in his pavilion when the sound reaches him. He is not a man easily surprised. But the sound he hears is not the sound of a raid. It is not the sound of a skirmish. It is the sound of a wave breaking. A continuous, growing roar of hoofbeats and screams and shattering wood, coming from the west, from the high ground he assumed was empty. He stands. His guards are already moving. Mamluks. The best of the best. Their discipline is instant. Shields lock. Spears level. They form a tight circle around the Sultan's tent, faces outward, eyes scanning the chaos. What they see makes no sense. A solid wedge of white-mantled knights is cutting through the camp like a hot knife through wax. They are not skirmishing. They are not raiding. They are driving in a straight, brutal line, directly toward the command pavilion. Saladin's mind works fast. Too fast. He understands two things immediately, and both are catastrophes. First, the crippled king is not in Ascalon. He is here, leading this charge. Second, his own army is not an army right now. It is a collection of scattered, surprised, unarmed men. The units that could stop this are miles away. The men around him are his personal guard, excellent, but outnumbered 5-1 by this furious, focused, unstoppable wedge. He barks an order. Form on the standard. Hold the line. The Mamluk guard tightens. These are not conscripts. They are professionals. They have faced cavalry charges before. They know how to brace, how to kill a horse, how to turn momentum into a stationary melee where numbers tell. They plant their feet. They angle their spears. They wait for the impact. The Templar wedge hits the Mamluk line, and for the first time all day, the momentum stops. It does not break. It does not shatter. It compresses. The sound changes. From the roar of a charge to the sickening, grinding cacophony of close combat. Metal screeching on metal. Horses screaming as spears find their bellies. Men roaring as swords find gaps in armor. The wedge, once a fluid blade, becomes a battering ram pressed against an iron door. Odo de Saint-Amand is in the thick of it. His horse is dead, speared through the chest. He fights on foot. His sword is a blur. He has lost his helmet. A cut on his forehead sends blood sheeting down the side of his face, but his eyes are clear. Focused. He shouts no encouragement. He gives no speeches. He kills. Efficiently. Relentlessly. Creating space for the knights behind him to push forward. Baldwin is surrounded by his guard. They have formed a protective circle around him. He is still on his horse, but the animal is panicking, rearing against the press of bodies. He sees the stalemate. He feels the charge dying against the rock of Saladin's guard. This is the moment. The moment where history balances on a razor's edge. If the wedge stalls here, the Muslim army, scattered as it is, will have time to recover, to rally, to realize the Christians are only 500 strong. The numerical advantage, once irrelevant in the shock of surprise, will become decisive. The charge must not stall. It must go through. And then it happens. The crack. Not in the Frankish line. In the Mamluk circle. A guardsman on the right flank, his shield arm tired from holding against the relentless pressure, lowers his guard for a single heartbeat. Just enough to adjust his grip. A Templar sergeant named Everard, his lance long gone, his sword notched and bloody, sees the opening. He does not think. He drives his warhorse forward. The horse's shoulder slams into the lowered shield. The Mamluk stumbles. The perfect circle ruptures. Everard is inside the guard. He is not alone. 2 more Templars pour through the gap behind him. Then 5. Then 10. The defensive ring, based on mutual support and unbroken contact, implodes from within. One moment, Saladin is behind a wall of shields. The next, he is looking into the blood-streaked face of a Frankish knight who is 10 feet away and closing. Saladin's nephew, Taqi al-Din, acts. He does not ask for permission. He grabs the Sultan by the arm. Hard. Another Mamluk seizes the other arm. They bodily lift Saladin, a man in his prime, a warrior in his own right, and half carry, half drag him toward the rear of the pavilion. A messenger camel is tethered there. A swift, bred-for-speed dromedary kept saddled for exactly this kind of emergency. They throw the Sultan onto the saddle. Taqi al-Din slaps the camel's flank. The animal lurches forward, then breaks into a rolling, ungainly gallop. Saladin looks back only once. He sees his personal standard, the golden eagle of the Ayyubids, tilt. Then fall. It disappears into a churn of mud and trampled silk and fighting men. The sight strikes him with a physical force. He does not speak. He turns his face to the east. And rides. The fall of the standard is the end. Word spreads through the Muslim camp faster than fire. The Sultan is fled. The standard is down. All is lost. What was a chaotic battle becomes a rout. What was a rout becomes a panic. What was a panic becomes a stampede. Men who were fighting 10 seconds ago throw down their weapons. They run. They do not run toward their comrades. They run east. Toward the desert. Toward the darkness. Toward anywhere that is not here. The Templar wedge, suddenly released from the pressure, surges forward. But there is no one left to fight. Only backs. Only fleeing men dropping loot, shedding armor, scrambling over each other to escape the valley. The charge is over. The slaughter is just beginning. The Frankish infantry, arriving breathless at the edge of the camp, now become the hammer. They fall upon the fleeing Muslims with the pent-up fury of men who have just watched their king and 500 knights do the impossible. They do not take many prisoners. They do not have the men to guard them. They kill. They chase. They turn a retreat into a massacre that will stretch for miles into the Judean night. In the center of the camp, stillness descends. A strange, hollow quiet, punctuated by the moans of the wounded and the crackle of burning tents. The Templars regroup around Odo. They are breathing hard, bloodied, exhausted, but their eyes are alive with a fierce, disbelieving light. They did it. Against every law of warfare. Against every calculation of odds. They did it. Baldwin sways in his saddle. The adrenaline that has sustained him for the past hour, that has held his body together through pain that should have rendered him unconscious, drains away all at once. The world tilts. His sword slips from numb fingers. It lands point first in the mud and sticks there, quivering. He tries to grip the pommel. His hands do not respond. He hears a voice. Distant. Muffled. My lord. He feels himself falling. But he does not feel the impact. 2 Templars catch him before he hits the ground. They lower him gently onto a discarded carpet near Saladin's own captured pavilion. His bandages are soaked with sweat and dirt and other men's blood. His breathing is shallow, ragged. A circle of worried faces forms above him. Odo, Reynald, the Bishop of Bethlehem, still clutching the true cross. Roger de Moulins, the master of the hospital, pushes through. His hands, trained for surgery, go to Baldwin's throat, feeling for a pulse. He tears away a section of the bloodied linen around the king's wrist. The skin beneath is pale, cold. But the pulse is there. Faint. Thready. But there. Baldwin's eyelids flutter. He opens his eyes. They focus slowly. On Odo's face, leaning over him, streaked with blood and grime and something that looks like tear tracks. Baldwin's lips move. The sound is a papery whisper, almost lost in the moaning wind. Did we win? Odo de Saint-Amand, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, a man who has not shown public emotion in a decade, closes his eyes. A single, solid tear cuts a clean line through the filth on his cheek. He opens his eyes. Looks at his king. Yes, my lord. His voice breaks. You shattered them. The field is yours. Around them, the Valley of Montgisard is a scene from a waking nightmare. Fires burn uncontrolled. Tents lie trampled. The dead and dying are scattered like broken dolls. The air smells of blood and smoke and spilled grain and the sharp, coppery scent of victory bought at a price no one yet knows how to count. 500 men stand in the center of it. 500 men who, an hour ago, were kneeling on a ridge praying for a miracle. They are not celebrating. They are staring at the boy king lying at their feet. At the bandages. At the shallow rise and fall of his chest. At the cost written in every labored breath. They have won the most lopsided victory in the history of the Crusades. And the man who led them to it may not live to see the sunrise. But the story of Montgisard does not end with the charge. It does not end with the Sultan's flight. It ends with what happens when dawn breaks over a field of the dead. It ends with the price. And with the decade that a dying boy just bought for a kingdom that does not yet know how desperately it will need it. This is the point where most history channels would cut to the credits. But we don't do that here. Because the real story, the one that changes how you understand sacrifice, is what happens next. Stay with us. Dawn does not break gently over Montgisard. It arrives like a slow, gray verdict. The light reveals what the darkness had mercifully hidden. The valley is not a battlefield. It is a butcher's floor stretched across a mile of churned earth. The dead lie in heaps where the Templar wedge passed. They slump against overturned supply carts. They float face down in irrigation ditches turned red. Frankish and Muslim alike. The air, once crisp with autumn cold, hangs thick and heavy with the iron-sweet smell of blood and the deeper, darker scent of opened earth. The living move through this landscape like ghosts. Frankish infantry, burgesses and settlers with spears still in hand, walk in stunned silence. They turn over bodies. They search for faces they know. A Templar sergeant kneels beside a fallen brother, gently closing the staring eyes with a blood-caked thumb. A Hospitaller brother moves from wounded man to wounded man, his black tunic stiff with other men's blood, his supplies long since exhausted. The cost is here. The cost is now. And the first full count will take days to complete. But the initial numbers, whispered from sergeant to knight to chronicler, will eventually harden into history. Frankish losses, over 1,100 dead. 750 wounded. A quarter of the entire force that rode from Ascalon. A generation of settlers, craftsmen, and farmers gone. Dozens of knights from great families who will never see their coastal manors again. Muslim losses. Catastrophic. Saladin has lost not a battle, but an army. Contemporary sources, Arab chroniclers writing in Damascus and Cairo in the weeks that follow, will struggle to describe the scale. They use phrases like, a calamity, a divine chastisement. The plain was littered with them like scattered gravel. Modern historians, cross-referencing the fragmentary records, estimate 80 to 90% of the force Saladin brought to Montgisard was destroyed. Not just defeated, killed, captured, or scattered so utterly they never reformed. 30,000 men came to this valley. Perhaps 3,000 will ever answer a muster again. The rest are dead, or running, or lost in a desert that shows no mercy to the unprepared. In the command tent, Saladin's own captured pavilion, now a hospital, Baldwin IV opens his eyes. He has survived the night. Barely. His physicians have worked over him in shifts. They have peeled away the blood-soaked bandages. They have found no new wounds. No sword cuts. No arrow punctures. The king's armor is dented, scratched, but not breached. The damage is all internal. The disease, agitated by the colossal strain of the ride and the charge and the cold night on the ground, has advanced. His fever is high. His breathing is wet and shallow. The lesions on his face are angry, vivid against skin the color of parchment. They do not think he will last the week. They tell him this in the careful, respectful tones of men delivering a weather report. Baldwin listens. His eyes are clear, focused. "Help me up," he says. They protest. They cite his fever, his pulse, the clear and present danger of his heart simply stopping if he exerts himself. "Help me up," he repeats. The voice is a rasp, but the command in it is absolute. 2 knights lift him. They wrap a thick wool cloak around his shoulders. They support his weight as his feet, swaddled in bandages, numb and unfeeling, touch the ground. He takes 1 step. Then another. He walks out of the tent. Into the dawn. Into his victory. The camp falls silent as he passes. Not a respectful silence. A reverent one. Hardened Templars, men who have just carved a path through an army, see their king walking. They see the tremor in his legs. They see the way his jaw is clenched against the pain. They see the raw truth of what yesterday cost him. And they kneel. Not to a monarch. To a sacrifice. Burgesses with bandaged heads kneel. Sergeants with broken arms kneel. Turcopole horsemen, their faces still streaked with dust and sweat, dismount and kneel. Baldwin stops before each cluster of men. His voice is too weak to carry, so his chamberlain repeats his words in a clear shout. "The king thanks you. The kingdom thanks you. You have saved Jerusalem this day." He looks at them. His clouded eyes meet theirs. "You are my brothers. And today, you were God's own hand." Men weep. Frankish soldiers, survivors of an impossible fight, cry openly as a dying boy calls them brothers and thanks them for a victory they know belongs to him alone. He walks the entire camp. Every step is agony. Every step is a message. I am with you. I share this. I pay this price beside you. By the time they help him back to his litter, his fever is spiking. His body is shaking with chills. The physicians exchange grim looks. It does not matter. He has done what he needed to do. The return to Jerusalem is a procession of ghosts. The column moves slowly now, burdened with wounded, laden with salvaged Muslim plunder, fine carpets, sacks of grain, weapons, the Sultan's own war chest. The true cross rides at the front, the reliquary now smudged with ash and dirt. A sacred object that has been to war and returned. Word has flown ahead of them, faster than any rider. Carried on the breath of fleeing Muslim survivors, on the prayers of monks in roadside monasteries, on the simple human need to share a story that defies belief. The leper king has won. Saladin is broken. Jerusalem stands. As the column approaches the Damascus gate, the city empties to meet it. Thousands pour from the streets. They line the road. They climb the walls. They bring flowers, which they will later realize are absurd to offer to men covered in blood and dust. They bring nothing, because nothing is adequate. They wait. And then they see him. Baldwin IV is not riding. He is propped on a litter carried by 4 Templar sergeants. He is wrapped in a plain brown cloak. His face is turned toward the sky, eyes closed, pale as the linen beneath his head. The crowd's cheer dies before it is born. It strangles in 10,000 throats. Because this is not the triumphant return of a conquering hero. This is the return of a spent offering. They see the price. They see it in the deep hollows of the king's cheeks, in the bluish tint of his lips, in the absolute stillness of his bandaged hands. They see it in the faces of the men behind him. The 500. Their armor is battered, dented, darkened with blood not their own. Their eyes are hollow with exhaustion. They do not smile. They do not wave. They walk with a heavy, plodding gait of men who have crossed into some other place and have only just returned. The crowd does not cheer. They weep. Silently. Openly. Without shame. Children are lifted to see. Fathers point and whisper, "Remember this." Mothers make the sign of the cross and pray. The column passes through the gate. The sound is the sound of shuffling feet, of creaking leather, of stifled sobs. The most lopsided military victory in Crusader history enters its capital in total, reverent silence. Because the people understand the transaction. Their security has been purchased with the last coins of a dying boy's vitality. And they are witnessing the receipt. Saladin reaches Ashkelon with perhaps 300 men. His body is unharmed. His pride is in ruins. The greatest general of his generation, the unifier of Islam, has been routed by a force he outnumbered 60 to 1. Led by a child he considered a non-factor. Defeated in a single shocking hour on an afternoon he believed was reserved for counting plunder. He does not rage. He does not execute scouts or blame commanders. He sits in a bare room in the coastal fortress. He stares at the wall. His biographers will later write that he accepted this defeat as a divine lesson in humility. That he vowed to be more careful, more respectful of his enemies, more thorough in his preparations. That is the public story. The private truth is simpler and darker. Montgisard haunts him. For 10 years, it haunts him. Every campaign he plans, he will remember the feel of being thrown onto that camel. The sight of his standard falling. The sound of the Frankish wedge, a sound he heard before he saw it, a sound he still hears in his dreams. He will rebuild his army. He will learn from his mistakes. He will become more cautious, more meticulous, more relentless. And in 1187, at the horns of Hattin, he will have his revenge. He will destroy the Crusader army. He will take Jerusalem. He will become the legend the world remembers. But he will never forget Montgisard. Without the shock of 1177, there is no Hattin in 1187. Without the humiliation of watching his invincible host shattered by a handful of knights and a dying boy, there is no patient, decade-long rebuilding. No obsessive study of Frankish tactics. No grinding, meticulous campaign of attrition that leads to the great victory the history books grant him. Montgisard is the wound that teaches Saladin how to win. It is the loss that makes his ultimate victory possible. Baldwin IV rules for 8 more years. He never recovers from Montgisard. The exertion accelerates the leprosy in ways his physicians document with clinical horror. Within a year, he is blind. His hands and feet begin to necrotize. The world shrinks to the dimensions of a curtained litter, then a canopied bed. But his mind does not decay. His will does not fracture. From his bed, he governs. He appoints regents, first his brother-in-law Guy of Lusignan, then Raymond of Tripoli when Guy proves disastrous. He navigates the vicious court politics of Jerusalem with a strategic clarity that leaves seasoned diplomats baffled. He issues charters. He settles disputes. He holds the crumbling kingdom together with nothing but the force of a personality that has long outgrown its physical container. He is dying. Everyone knows it. But he is still the king. And he will be the king until his last breath. In the spring of 1185, that breath comes. He is 24 years old. He has been king for 9 years. He has been dying for 15. His death is recorded not as a tragedy, but as a release. A long, painful martyrdom finally completed. The kingdom mourns. But it also breathes a sigh of profound, guilty relief. Watching him suffer was an agony for those who loved him. His suffering is over. Now you know the story. The numbers. The charge. The bandaged hands on the reins. The crack in the Mamluk guard. The true cross on the ridge. But here is the final question. The one that matters after the history books close. Why does Montgisard still matter? Not as a tactical lesson. Military historians will study it for centuries. The value of surprise, the importance of intelligence, the devastating effect of shock against a dispersed enemy. It matters for a different reason. It matters because it is a story about the substance of power. In 1177, power had a simple definition. It was numbers. It was land. It was gold. It was healthy bodies and sharp swords and the logistical might to move 30,000 men across a desert. Baldwin IV had none of those things. He had a failing body, a handful of knights, a sacred fragment of wood, and an absolute, unwavering decision. He redefined power in that valley. He proved that power is not what you have. It is what you are willing to spend. He had nothing left to spend but himself. So he spent himself. And in spending himself, he changed the trajectory of history. He bought 10 years. 10 years of life for the Crusader states. 10 years of art, of faith, of commerce, of people living and loving and building in a land that was supposed to be erased in the autumn of 1177. 10 years is a generation. 10 years is a legacy. 10 years is the difference between a forgotten footnote and a story that still burns 8 centuries later. This is the lesson of Montgisard. The lesson you carry away from this valley. When you face your own impossible odds, not on a battlefield, but in your life, in your work, in your darkest hours, you will be told to count the cost, to weigh the odds, to be prudent, to be realistic. Remember the leper king. Remember the boy who could not feel his hands, who looked at 30,000 enemies and saw not a reason to hide, but a reason to ride. He did not win because he had the stronger army. He won because he had the stronger why. His body was broken. His cause was not. And in the end, the cause is all that history remembers. This was dark history exhumed, where the past still bleeds.